There's another feature that I want to share with you, which is called transparency. So let me go to the transparency panel. So let's see here. Is this the transparency panel? There's the transparency panel. So this little icon that looks like two circles overlapping one another is the transparency panel. Let me open that up and tear this away. So you'll notice that this doesn't say transparency. It uses a term, what does it say right there? Opacity. Okay, so opacity comes from the word opaque. What is an opaque object? What does that mean? You cannot see through it. An opaque object, you cannot see through it. So by default, the opaqueness of an object is set to 100. So it means it's not transparent. But if I change the opaqueness of this object to 60, the opaqueness is 60, it now has transparent or transparency. What is the percentage of transparency? If the opaqueness is 60, what is the percentage of transparency? 40. Does that make sense? So the more transparent something is, the less opaque. The less opaque, the more transparent it is. Okay, so I'm going to make two graphics and stack them on top of one another. And I'm going to make one yellow and one red. I'm going to make the yellow object 50% opaque, which makes it 50% transparent. So you'll notice that this object is stacked on top. The object below is now bleeding through it. So this is basically a transparent effect. Does that make sense? Okay, so here's one for you. Whenever you add transparency to an object, it is no longer a vector. It is a hybrid, just like live paint, just like those effects. Transparency cannot exist in a vector. So if I want the illusion of transparency, I have to expand this or flatten transparency. That's where the term flattened transparency comes from. A vector cannot be transparent. I need to flatten that illusion. So let me do that. Okay. So here's a copy. I'm going to select both of these graphical elements, and I'm going to go to Flatten Transparency and hit OK. Do they look the same? They do, right? They do. Well, let's see what Flatten Transparency did. You'll notice that Flatten Transparency took the ellipses and put them in a group. In that group, it's no longer two shapes. It's now three shapes. They're grouped together. Let me ungroup them. So what it did is it redrew the graphical combination to compile this as an illusion, a stacked illusion. So this yellow object was 50% opaque. How about this one? 100. So it found the solid or fully opaque equivalent of this yellow, redrew that shape, and filled it with that appropriate color. And it did the same thing for the intersection. So Flatten Transparency redraws your content that had transparency and releases it as a vector. Does that make sense? Let me show you another example of transparency. Okay, so I'm going to draw a poly. I draw this poly, and I'm going to fill it with a bright red. And on the edge, the stroke, I'm going to make it green. And I'm going to apply a brush to this. Zoom in. Look at the brush. You'll notice that the brush, in this case, has a tattered edge to it. You'll notice that there's little spaces where the brush is missing, the stroke is missing. It becomes tapered on one side, and there's little fragments floating around. Is there a path describing this effect? Is there a path or an edge? When I hit Command Y, does it match up? No. So this is an indication that this stroke truly is an effect. And it has transparency. That's how I can get these sort of little edges that I can see through it. So this is another example of, once again, a transparency, a form of a transparency. So if I wanted the software to release this as a vector, how would I turn this into a vector based on today's conversations? How did I convert my other stuff into a vector?
Expand.
Let's go to Object. In this case, it's Expand Appearance. But there it is, Expand Appearance. And you'll notice that when I did that, let me do that again. Expand Appearance. It drew the edge around this for me. Now when I go to Command Y, you can see all of the line work that defines the stroke. When you expand, something else happens. It removes the object or the effect from being editable. So I can edit this, the weight of this stroke, right? So I can change the weight of this stroke. When I expand it, can I still do that? No, I can't, because it's been released as a vector. It's sort of leaving it in that exact state. It's called the lockup. That is the appropriate design term. I am locking up the shape to be in that state. So logos are locked up. Any strokes or effects that might be in a logo, if it's truly a vector, have been expanded and locked in that state. Does that make sense, everyone? All right, so let me expand this again. So I'm going to go to Expand Appearance. You can see it drew an edge around it. And if I hit Command Y, I can see the line work and anchors that define it.